denk dat je niet zo vreselijk veel macht hebt om dingen anders te laten gaan. Het gebeurt gewoon.
Maar ja, ik ben wel blij dat ik gewoon nog leef natuurlijk.
On voit l'être aimé, complètement distordu et il est là, il est plus là, mais en même temps il est là.
Quando hai alle spalle un dolore, una sofferenza del genere, apprezzi anche le piccole cose. Non è scontato niente, non è scontato che respiri, non è scontato che stai in piedi e cammini, puoi correre, non è scontato vedere il sole, non è scontato niente.
Bijna verdwaasd rond, in een trance rond. Maar ik moet zeggen, de zorg eromheen is wel heel erg goed. En ja, het was een heftige tijd, maar wel een mooie tijd.
Welke gevoelens ik heb ervaren. Ja, je bent ontzettend nauw betrokken bij mijn vrouw, wat die meemaakt. En je kunt daar niks mee, maar je moet er zelf mee uit de voeten. En je hebt wel het volle vertrouwen, dat had ik wel steeds.
Io sono un medico di terapia intensiva, non un rianimatore, nel senso che lavoro con i neonati, quindi mi occupo di tutt'altra di bambini molto molto piccoli, non faccio il loro stesso lavoro, però chiaramente il rapporto con i medici è stato condizionato anche dalla mia posizione. Tra l'altro sono dei colleghi perché sono nel mio stesso, quindi da una parte ero sicuramente facilitata nel comprendere razionalmente quello che stava succedendo, cioè non avevo bisogno dei lunghissimi colloqui perché mi spiegassero per avere notizie cliniche, perché era più semplice riassumermi le cose. D'altra parte, dal punto di vista umano, dal punto di vista emotivo, questo non è servito a niente, anzi forse ha peggiorato le cose, perché sapevo cosa poteva succedere e non volevo accettarlo.
Ahora lo que me motiva es mejorar la vida de la gente. Ya no es tanto la técnica, ¿no?, como cuando eres joven, porque llega un punto que la técnica es técnica y no tiene ningún secreto, sino las pequeñas cosas que pueden hacer que marcan la diferencia. El hablar con el paciente, con la familia, el hacer una educación sanitaria que nadie ha hecho hasta ese punto y tú no lo sabías porque dabas por hecho que lo habían hecho. Esas cosas son las que te motivan, el mejorar el cuidado del paciente.
Il faut faire du cas par cas, en fait. C'est primordial. Parce que chaque histoire est différente. Et quand vous vous trouvez en tant que patient, en tant que famille de patients, dans cette situation, dans un univers où vous ne parlez pas cette langue-là, cette langue faite d'acronymes et de termes techniques que vous ne connaissez pas, quand vous vous retrouvez face au savoir et que du coup vous vous retrouvez impuissant, que vous vous retrouvez stupide, que vous vous retrouvez humilié, que vous vous retrouvez démuni, comment faire?
Jokainen lääkäri varmaan pelkää komplikaatiota tai jotakin, että mitään ei hiffaa jotain juttua, mitä olisi pitänyt hiffata, joskin siinäkin auttaa se, että harvoin tekee yksin koko päivää töitä. Nämä tuli nyt äkkiseltään mulle mieleen.
And what scares me is that making those decisions and making those wrong decisions and the realization that that decision in 3-4 weeks' time, where you end up having a patient who, in effect, can be crippled by life-sustaining therapy, which may not have been in their best interests or the family's best interests. And that still scares me. And I think it scares a lot of colleagues, but intensive care is much more multidisciplinary now, and I think that has helped our decision-making and has reduced that fear factor.
Honesty and humility go a long way. And most patients and relatives understand that we're also human and mistakes can happen and should be openly discussed.
Οι ασθενείς όμως έρχονται σε επαφή με εμάς, ιδιαίτερα αυτοί που βγαίνουν από το νοσοκομείο, πηγαίνουν σε κέντρα αποκατάστασης και ύστερα από πάρα πολύ καιρό έρχονται να μας συναντήσουν, γιατί ξέρουν τα πρόσωπά μας, τις φωνές μας, τον αγώνα που δίνουμε μέσα στο χώρο για να καταφέρουμε να τους σώσουμε, να επιβιώσουν και έρχονται να μας δουν, να μας γνωρίσουν από κοντά, να τους δούμε κι εμείς.
Together with my colleagues, in particular the nursing colleagues, we arranged a wedding for a patient who was at the end of his life and had decided to marry his long-term partner before he later died. And it was very moving to be part of this very special event in the intensive care unit.
It's a real privilege to be able to support a patient and their family through that what I hope is the worst thing that ever happens to them in their lives, to be able to support them through that, hopefully to recovery, or to support them through managing a dignified death.
Il faut ramener la vie. Pourquoi est-ce que tout est si blanc et voire gris? Pourquoi est-ce que ce lino couine autant sous les crocs des médecins? C'est insoutenable. Pourquoi est-ce que tout est autant aseptisé? C'est pas 3 photos qui vont empêcher les gens de travailler. Moi, je pense que c'est important de ramener de la vie à cet endroit où on se trouve à la frontière au bord d'eux, on se trouve dans une espèce de no man's land où on sait pas sur quoi ça va déboucher, quoi.
La mia opinione della terapia intensiva è fantastica perché mi hanno salvato la vita e dopo 3 anni sono qui. Anche a un altro ospedale che mi avevano dato per morto, per fortuna sono arrivato in questa terapia intensiva e mi hanno salvato veramente la vita.
Solo belle cose possono uscire dalla mia bocca, ovviamente, perché senza di loro non sarei qui, ripeto, non sarei qui oggi.
Intensive care medicine allows me to learn something new every day. So every day I meet colleagues and I hear of their new technologies, new advances, and progress in their particular specialty. But most importantly, every day is a different day with new challenges, and I enjoy the interaction with my colleagues and most importantly with patients and their relatives. So it provides a great variety, it's different every day, and it's a specialty where progress is made on a regular basis.
Grazie perché mi hanno ricordato anche come si lavora. Cioè, io faccio questo mestiere, lo faccio da tanti anni, ci sono dei momenti in cui sei stanco, in cui hai le tue cose, nel senso che hai la tua vita, hai delle preoccupazioni, però io ero serena quando andavo via, non perché sapevo che non sarebbe morto, poteva morire, poteva star male, ma era nelle mani migliori. Sapevo che era nelle migliori mani e questo mi dava quel minimo di tranquillità che potevo cercare. È giusto che i bambini che mi vengono affidati e i genitori quando vanno a casa possano pensare la stessa cosa. Siamo nelle migliori mani, quindi dobbiamo sempre fare il meglio. Grazie a loro per esserlo il meglio.
So I am a full-time intensivist and proud to be one. We're all working together in a multidisciplinary fashion to fight COVID-19. Together, we are intensive care medicine.
Hello, I'm internal medicine specialist and I'm proud to be an intensivist. We intensivists are working hard to fight for COVID-19. Together, we are intensive care medicine. Thank you.
I am the editor of Intensive Care Medicine Journal and I'm proud to be an intensivist. We are working together to fight COVID-19 and to take care also of non-COVID patients. Together, we are intensive care medicine.
I'm a nephrologist and I'm proud to be an intensivist. We intensivists are working together to fight COVID-19. Together, we are intensive care medicine.
I'm an anesthesiologist and I'm proud to be an intensivist. We intensivists are working together to fight COVID-19. Together, we are intensive care medicine.
Welcome to this webinar on leadership in crisis management. My name is Stefan SCHALLER from the Charité University Hospital in Berlin, and I welcome you all and especially our leader and president, Maurizio CECCONI. Maurizio CECCONI, who will give the talk and then we will discuss together with him. He is the president of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, and he's also the head of the Anesthesia and Intensive Care Department at the Humanitas Research Hospital in Milan. Interestingly, he was the youngest full professor and head of department in Italy. About this webinar, this is a new series the society has developed because of a survey and the educational needs which were assumed in all intensivists. This will be a series of 3 webinars. We will have a multidisciplinary and multi-professional speakers and team. The topics are leadership in crisis management today, self and team care, so prevention and treatment of burnout next week, and the last one will be about patient and family care in the pandemic. So welcome and looking forward to your talk, Maurizio, and to the discussion afterwards.
Hi, Stefan. Very nice to be here with you today, and I look forward to our chat later. So I will start. I would like to share my screen, please. I think I need to be given control. I believe you may have the sharing control, Stefan. I'm not allowed to share my screen at the moment.
Actually, I'm not the host, it's the Studio One.
Okay, so while the studio starts to sort this out, I'm very happy to give a talk, even without slides, by the way. But if I can have my slides, I would be very happy. So I think I can now. So So I will try to share a little bit of my experience in this, and I think especially this year, COVID-19 has been a great challenge for all of us. But I will try to share my experience locally, nationally, internationally, also what we've tried to do with the society, what I've learned from colleagues in leadership, also in research. This year, it's really been an unprecedented year from this point of view. And probably show how it's important to learn these skills, because one of the common themes, I think, of things that have worked well over the last 15 months during this pandemic, it has been really when there has been a lot of preparation around the teams, around clinical networks, research networks, and so on and so on. For me, I always have one day in mind for this crisis, which was the 20th of February 2020. And I remember I was on a train to Zurich for a meeting at the Marco Maggiorini Hospital. And I got texted that there was a case that got basically identified in an intensive care unit in Lombardy outside of Wuhan. This was the first case of a secondary transmission in ICUs. And data is crucial always when you have to trying to lead a response into something. And this single data point for us was a very important data point. We knew from China, from Wuhan, that it was very rare for young patients to be severely affected by the virus. And this case particularly didn't have any risk factors for SARS-CoV-2 at all. The intensivist decides even to force the local protocol because the patient is treated for atypical pneumonia, is not improving, has no risk factors for having been in contact with someone from China or someone with known SARS-CoV-2, but then that swab comes back positive. And for us, it's like waking up in a nightmare, realizing that probably there has been a lot of secondary transmission undetected in the community. Indeed, up to some days before, we didn't really think to have a problem in Europe. I took this slide, I prepared this slide for a talk on data science on the 16th of February, which was just 4 days before the beginning of the crisis in Europe. And as you see, Italy does not even make it to the league here, but what we know is that we're not detecting cases. That meeting for me in America, it's a very important meeting in my story, because there I was together with colleagues from all over the world. It was the meeting of the Society of Critical Care Medicine. We were all looking at what was happening in Wuhan. We all felt that if an outbreak would occur in our countries, would have to put a plan of action in place. But the realization, I think, a few days later was that no one of us was really prepared. I think everyone kind of underestimated the speed of the outbreak, and the rest is history for any of you that are listening and watching today, because the story of the outbreak is really being something that we've all seen. Collecting data was crucial for us. Giacomo Grasselli and Antonio Pesenti, they were coordinating our response in the ICU network in Lombardy. We were taking very simple data points every day, just the number of ICU patients coming to our units. And every day it was slightly higher. I remember 10, 11, 14, 15. You may even think that that was a linear growth, but actually very early we modeled this with the Foundation Bruno Kessler in Trento. And as you see, this was an exponential rise, which could have led, and these are all mathematical models, so they are probably not the most accurate ones, but the range would have been from a linear growth of 870 ICU admissions by the 20th of March, to 14,000 ICU admissions on the 20th of March, which was basically just in 2-3 weeks. Just to give you an idea where we started, we had only 850 beds open for level 3 care in February. And of these beds, probably 20 were free. It's winter time, surgery is ongoing, there are other infections and so on. So we really had no capacity basically left when we discovered that we had a problem. The only way for us to get ready was basically to organize ourselves into a network where we coordinated and we gave each other, every time there was a free bed, we gave the bed to the network so that the patient could basically be transferred to the free ICU beds. And we started to increase bed capacity very fast. So I will show you later how big was the increase. And those were also the days where I started to be in contact with colleagues around the world. I remember I was the president-elect of the society at the time, and Joseph Keseshoglu was the president. And I can only cannot praise really Joseph enough for listening to us in Lombardy. I remember speaking with him pretty much every day from the first hours of the crisis and saying, look, numbers are increasing here. But if you remember, it was the first days, there was a lot of confusion in TV, a lot of people saying this is just a flu. is not going to be so bad. What's happening in Lombardy is just probably an unlucky cluster. And one of the easiest things that occurs sometimes when you are faced with uncertainty and a new crisis, the natural instinct of many of us, of every one of us really, is to wait for more information. You try to downplay the threat. You don't want to give bad news. You're thinking, let's see just if something happens, and you're really trying to put a lot of efforts in explaining actions, and in explaining what's happening rather than actually reacting to what's happening. That, unfortunately, is a mistake when you have a new crisis. When you have a new crisis, you need to look at the data, and whatever data you have, it may not be perfect, but is the data that is available there. And this data is what you need to take into account, understanding that it's not perfect, and you need to communicate with transparency what you're seeing, but you need to act with urgency, and importantly, take responsibility to focus and solve the problems. And we did this locally, but locally it was something that we just had to do because we had so many patients coming our way. With the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, those were the days where, together with colleagues from Lombardy, we decided we have the moral duty to send out a warning to the rest of the world. So you may have seen this. This was a presidential letter that was sent out with basically the first 10 days of our history in Lombardy. Our message was very simple. Try to contain the infection in the community, but importantly, this is real, and really get ready. After a year, I still receive a lot of messages saying that probably this letter of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, this president letter, has helped many colleagues realizing that what was happening was really real. And I think this is a big learning that we have to bring with us on now, even having had a network of clinicians and scientists, of members of our community, provided to be a network of disseminating knowledge and sharing knowledge and information. It was only because we had 30 years of a society behind us so that people could trust what we were saying. And this is a very important message. Societies, scientific societies, scientific journals had a very important role in terms of leadership of information during this pandemic, which is actually filtering proper information that could be useful to healthcare systems and to colleagues around the world. In my local team, I remember very vividly the first 24 hours. I remember saying to one of my colleagues, can you come to the hospital? It was Sunday. I think we need to open a new ICU, and we need to do it quickly because numbers of patients may start to increase very fast. This is one of the pictures of the first beds that we open in an operating block. You will see that we use a very high level of protective gear. Actually, if you come to our hospitals now, we don't use anymore this. We use a slightly lower level of personal protective equipment. Why did we do that? We did that because there was uncertainty. We were listening to the news and receiving information from Wuhan, where up to 10% of the infections were healthcare workers. We didn't know how serious this was. We were scared. We wanted to protect each other. We wanted to protect our families. Many of us decided not to meet with our families for some months. And we really had a goal in mind, which was really trying to give an ICU bed to whoever would benefit from an ICU bed. But importantly, let's protect each other. And I do remember that as a head of department, what was keeping me awake at night was exactly this, trying to find the resources to give beds to patients that were in need for an ICU bed. But also maybe even more worrying sometimes, it was how do I make sure that in those moments where it's so difficult to find face masks and donning gear and so on, no one of my team gets infected. During those days, we put very quickly in action a system to train everyone to work in a completely different way. Everyone does the training for donning and doffing, but that's something that if you're not used to do then, you're not familiar with it. So one idea that we had was actually to bring a simulation team in situ. in the new ICU. And we worked for 48 hours in a row from the beginning of the crisis to basically train 80 clinicians, which was the first team deployed to open the new ICU. And everyone got training in donning, in doffing, in intubating and proning in a new environment. And while the first patients were arriving, we were also using random drills to see if everyone was able to work safely for patients, but also for the team and for himself or for herself. There were crazy days in terms of numbers. As I said to you before, we started from 850 ICU beds, of which they were basically all occupied. We stopped elective surgery, which freed about 200 beds immediately. But during the first 6-7 weeks of the crisis, we went up to 1,500 level 3 ICU beds for invasively mechanically ventilated patients. We had another 300 beds for other emergencies, non-COVID emergencies. And we had probably another 2,000 beds that were level 2 beds for CPAP, high-flow nasal cannulas that we opened together with the help of other specialties in other wards. And I always remember these days, which was around the 17th of March, where in just one single day in the region, we admitted 151 invasively mechanically ventilated patients, which was the peak of new admissions, which basically, it was in one day, it was 20% of our overall capacity pre-COVID. What was the most difficult thing during those days? Everyone was talking about ventilators, about drugs, about sedatives. It is true that it was not easy to find all those resources at the beginning, but probably one of the more difficult thing was how to find the people, how to find the healthcare workers to work in this unprecedented crisis. What I'm showing you here is Amy Edmondson. Amy Edmondson is a professor of leadership at the Harvard Business School. I was lucky to have her as one of my teachers. She also came to open one of our annual conferences in Vienna at ESIC a few years ago. She teaches about leadership, teams and teaming in healthcare organizations. I do invite you to watch her videos or to read her books. She tells a fantastic story of how the Chilean miners in San Jose in Chile, where there was a cave and they got trapped into a mine, how they survived 70 days with an extraordinary effort of people outside on the surface, but also this team of people in the cave, in the mine, and how they survived. So one of the things that it's very important to learn in a situation like this is, how do you create a team with people that never work together? And I know that many of you can relate to this. When you increase your ICU capacity of 4 times, it means that you need to find probably 3-4 times the number of people that work in ICU. But these are not specialists. These are people that have been deployed by other wards. It's not just the technical skills that you have to teach that are very difficult, but it's also, how do we work together? How do we find a way so that who is coming to help feels in a safe situation to help, and who is receiving the help, so the ICU team can actually supervise, can get these people safely into the teams for the patients, but also for the team itself. One thing that, for instance, we didn't have in my hospital was a way to simply to introduce each other at the beginning of the shift. And this was just a simple idea that helped a lot everyone to get familiar with each other. In Italy, it's not common to change hospital. Even as a trainee or as a doctor, you tend to work always in the same place. So normally we know each other very well by name. We don't even need to have badges. But this was a completely new situation. We had protective gear, which was masking everyone. You could not even recognize each other. So we were writing our names on our gowns. But still, we often have nurses, doctors that had not worked in the same ICU or together before. So we decided to put a simple procedure at the beginning of the shift. When the handover was completed, everyone was stopping for a few minutes, introducing each other, understanding if it was the first time that you were working in this place, and then deciding to prioritize what was the most high-risk thing that we are going to do together today. And are you familiar with it? Have you already done it? in order to do this, you really have to create a climate of psychological safety. And that means that what you have to put your efforts is on a climate, on relationship, on communications, so that it's not just being nice to each other. It means that everyone feels empowered about questioning a procedure that which maybe is not safe. By asking for help, you feel empowered to say that maybe you need help, let me help you, and so on, and trying really to get standards of care that are as good as you can do. It was really a moment where I remember a moment where we were all tired, surprised, sometimes scared, but also a moment which was very nice in terms of working together in a new way, really to try to put this effort to create teams. One very important thing in those moments, and I would say in any crisis, really is to work continuously on communication. There is not enough communications in moments like this. And when you have a crisis with uncertainty, and certainly the COVID-19 crisis as being one of the biggest crises in terms of uncertainty, it's very important to frame this situation. So framing the problem, framing the situation properly, be clear about what we know, but also be transparent about what we don't know, and be transparent about this uncertainty. And especially if you are leading the response, it's very crucial to create moments where you have large team meetings, sometimes smaller team meetings, but you need to find a system for discussing together. Rather than giving the solution, what probably worked best for me was trying to explore with questions, what are the resources that we have? What are the priorities that we're going to put? And if we find a solution that we want to try, let's look at the positive side, but we don't just need people coming to us with the positive side of things. We need to think also about the possible negative sides. And it's important maybe sometimes even to give the task to someone to be the one looking for the negative sides of the plan. This is as important sometimes, if not more important, than just looking at the positive side. And focusing on problem solving, and again, empowering people to raise questions, to raise issues, to say that maybe they are disagreeing with this. This was something very, very important. I remember starting sometimes with a plan, and at the end of the meeting coming with a completely different solution, and again, adapting to the situation continuously. Being clear about common goals is also something very important in a situation like this. I remember that when we met with my team, we said it's going to be very difficult to provide the quality that we provide normally. And it's impossible to provide the same quality. When you're so stretched for capacity, you need to decide what are going to be the primary goals. And our primary goals, we were very clear about that. We wanted to give an ICU bed to whoever would benefit from one. We wanted to protect our patients, which means we wanted to have systems in place where we could make sure that we were not infecting non-COVID patients, and we wanted to make sure that we were protecting each other, to make sure that we would not impact each other in terms of being infected with COVID. What you see in this picture here, for instance, is a safety officer. This was a rota of people that was just in charge to supervise the doffing during the first weeks of the crisis. Why was that? Because we didn't have enough personal protective equipment to change it 2 or 3 times during a shift. So in order to guarantee that there was enough for every shift, for everyone, we were entering into the ICU with donning ones, and you were just doing the doffing at the end of the shift after 8-10 hours in a row, sometimes 12 hours. So we were drinking before, eating before, and just coming back at the end of the shift. You are now exhausted, you are tired. That's the moment where you are more likely to do a mistake with the doffing. So we decided to have one person less on the shop floor, but to have one person in the changing rooms to help each other to feel safe. I don't know if that was what made the difference about not being infected, certainly, because it was a decision that we decided and we took together. Everyone felt we were putting this extra effort to feel safe and to feel protected with each other. Very importantly, to reassess the situation very often. It may change every 48 hours, every week or so, to adapt to the new situation, and again, to change the solution and to be ready to change the solutions. Before I move to the rest of my presentation, I want to state how important it is to really to be clear and to communicate continuously with the team. I was using a lot email groups routinely to show and to document what we were deciding, but I was also trying to use every possible means, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, you name it, to try to get together even with the distancing that we had to keep, so that communication was really there to try to make everyone in the loop and to listen to everyone. Being clear about common goals was also something very important to try to prevent at least a moral injury. We will come back to that later. This is not the key topic of today's talks, but it certainly is very important that you are agreeing as a team on what are going to be the goals now. The goals cannot be the goals that you normally have in terms of quality of care when you're working with 15 patients, if suddenly you're working with 80 patients. And being clear about this, it's something that allows everyone in the team to be clear about what you're going to do during your shift and preventing, or at least minimizing, moral distress and moral injury. So this clear line of communication is very important. With the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, we also decided that we had to take the lead in trying to share information. That was our mission. When I was speaking with Joseph and our executive committee and everyone really in the society, we decided that our goal from the first days was to provide free knowledge that everyone could trust at the bedside immediately. You may remember the marathon event that we did at the end of March last year. It connected about 130,000 clinicians, everyone trying to share knowledge and to listen to the others. With the society, we also try to help the response of the institutions at European level. The European Commission asked us to help and to try to find a way to prepare in case of a second and a third wave. And unfortunately, as we know, we had a second and a third wave. We were very happy that the European Commission asked us questions, because by asking the questions, they probably got the answers they were not expecting at the beginning. At the beginning, they were asking about how many ventilators, which type of ventilator, which type of drugs, which type of sedatives should we stock and should we store in case of a second and a third wave. And while we were happy that there were plans in place and a blueprint at the European level for this, what we commented was also the fact that the most scarce resource were actually ICU healthcare workers. And it was impossible to train just in a few weeks or in a few months specialist nurses, specialist doctors, physiotherapists, and so on and so on. But maybe what we could do was to provide a way to teach and to train basic skills in intensive care for all those healthcare workers that may be deployed during a surge. So healthcare workers that do not work regularly in intensive care. These ideas were the backbone of what probably has been one of the largest ever training programs for healthcare workers during an emergency. This is C19 Space. I'm just going to show you this quick video to highlight some of the features of what we did last year.
We cannot be unprepared twice. Prevention does not begin at the gate of intensive care, but at the community. That's why we need all your help. We need a healthcare army. Welcome to this immersive learning experience of C19 Space.
Following this program will really help them to get an idea of what working in an ICU is like and to really be immersed in the basics of learning ICU skills.
Basic training so that people get accompanied or accustomed to how an ICU looks like, what is expected from them, the use stuff around, and will always be ICU stuff around to support you when you call for help.
This goes into much more detail and provides key learning objectives and also some assessment to test knowledge. That hasn't been easy to do during the COVID period. Pulling together different individuals from different countries, all with a common aim. So I think that's been very valuable.
Exciting, innovative and portable.
It's incredibly positive, coming at the right time, and if we can use it and build on it, it's fantastic.
It's very innovative and interesting to do it. So let's do it.
And with this training, which I admit we worked 24/7 for about 3 weeks to organize and deliver it with more than 70 experts from all over Europe. And I cannot really thank enough everyone involved with this. And then every local trainer, everyone that engaged in to try to put their time and energy to train other people in their teams locally. We managed to train and to involve more than 20,000 healthcare workers in less than 6 months. The program is just being completed with more than 3,000 trainers. We are now looking at possibilities to extend this training also outside of Europe. But what I'm proud of is that we were part of something that was focused not just on devices, but was focused on people. It was really focused on trying to give people some skills so that they could feel more reassured when they were joining ICU teams. Now, one of the last things that I want to mention about leadership during a crisis is also the fact that a crisis is, by definition, a moment that is going to put a lot of stress on our teams. And I think it's important to realize that this stress actually can be something that could really go as far as burnout. We looked at this with Elia Zuley and with the society. We know that the burnout symptoms were very common in ICU healthcare workers, and they're going to be common. And it's important to recognize this because ignoring it is not going to make it to go away. And there are different ways that this can affect. It can go as far as post-traumatic stress disorder. Probably the most common thing that you're going to see is moral distress and moral injury. Often, these things are not due only to the high workload that you have. It's not just the extra hours that you do and the fact that you're looking at more patients. It's the fact that this high workload sometimes makes us forget what is really important to keep a good climate. And good climate comes from relationships and from really working on a structure where we try to minimize these issues, or at least we try to deal with these issues. For instance, what we noticed was that it was very common to see that the difference between having or not having symptoms of burnout or anxiety were often related not just to the more challenging environment that we had, which was normal, but to the fact that this was bringing conflicts within the team. Sometimes it was bringing conflicts with the family. And I don't have to tell you how stressful it was not to have relatives at the bedside, and now just the telephone call or the video call impacted our way of feeling that we are caring for patients. Also, how we make decision-making. And again, the fact that maybe you've not been told that it's okay not to provide the same quality, because now the quality is actually increasing the quantity of ICU bed that we're staffing. So being clear about this communication, being clear about trying to be nice to each other, really trying to understand that the other person is under stress is extremely important. Remember, nobody remembers the detail of what you say, but pretty much everyone will remember the way you make him feel or you make her feel. So it's very crucial to pay attention to this. And even if it is extra energy to do it, it really pays off in terms of climate, and I think also in terms of care that we do for our patients. One last comment before I move a little bit to research and then we go to an end. As I said, these things are unfortunately normal during a crisis like this. There's no point of ignoring them. The best thing is to realize that they are there. Try to create some peer support. Try to stay safe, safe physically, mentally. Really try to help the others having the same focus. It means sometimes getting rid of all the other things that sometimes we do during normal times. I remember cutting down a lot of the journal clubs and other things at the beginning. Now we restore them because they are important for our team. But during the very first weeks, it's important that you put your energy in the time and in the things that will make you feel good, or at least to try to get some energy back when you're not in the shift. And taking care of yourself as a leader is also very important. If you get exhausted, if you are leaving the thing at some point because you don't have energy anymore, it's going to impact them even more. So really try to give yourself a little bit of time sometimes to regain the batteries. It's okay, even when things are very different. And I think really the metaphor of that fact that a crisis has to be taken from the very beginning as if it is a marathon and not just a sprint. It's very important to pace ourselves and our energy. I'm going to conclude just to talk a little bit about the importance of leadership also in research. From Lombardy, we try to disseminate all our data from day one. It was important. We didn't know if our outcomes were good or bad. We thought it was important to share everything that we had with the scientific community. And this editorial of Deborah Cook, John Marshall, and Robert Fowler, I think describes very well why transparency in reporting data during this pandemic, in general, in science, but during crises like this, is crucial, because this transparency, this way of sharing everything that you have, can really help others to be better prepared and maybe to plan for other studies that could really improve patient outcomes. I'm going to show you just a couple of slides and then I'll come into an end, but I really believe that the adaptive trials have been extraordinary to bring useful research at the bedside. I'm mentioning recovery. I was an NHS consultant for 14 years in London. I'm seeing how the NHR network for delivering research in the NHS had developed. And it's very important to remember that what we have seen as an extraordinary contribution of research from the UK, from the NHS, just to name the UK, there are being other examples worldwide, but it's very important to name this, because it did not occur as something that was improvised during the pandemic. This network to deliver research is something that had been put in place for 10 years. And this is a very important message in terms of leadership, whether this is clinical, whether this is in terms of research. You need to invest in creating a structure for leadership, and from good leadership and good delivery of anything that we are doing during normal times. If you put those efforts there, then all the other actions become easier and faster, even during a crisis. Just look at the numbers of what recovery has done. Nearly 40,000 patients randomized into one of the largest ever platforms for research that occurred. I think it's extraordinary. Other organizations, I think, have to be praised for what they have tried to do. Thanks to the amount of research and high quality of research that we've been able to produce in 12 months, together with the WHO, for instance, there have been a series of guidelines to try to provide simple information to bedside clinicians all around the world to show what's working and what's not working. And with that, this is the end of my talk. I would be very happy now to have a chat with Stefan and to answer to any questions, but I really believe it's been a moment. It's been 15 months. We don't know for how long this pandemic will end. I think it's very important to remember that the pandemic will end only when it will end everywhere. And I think in countries like European countries, which we represent, but we have to remember that there are many countries in less privileged situation than ours, where maybe they don't have the same access to vaccines and therapies. We really have to try to put our effort there so that everyone gets protected, everyone get access to the ways to end up the pandemic everywhere in the world. And if we can do that with a smile, even behind the mask, I think we are part of something very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurizio. So I would like to invite you all to ask questions through the social media or through ESICM TV. And while we are waiting for the first question, Maurizio, I would like to take a minute and take this opportunity to thank you for your leadership. Because as you have explained, I really believe that telling what was happening in Italy was essential. And also your leadership with C19 Space brought this big program forward. You encouraged us all to take part during these times in the program, and you motivated everyone in the team to be part of this program and make this possible.
Thank you, Stefan, but it flatters me to receive this, especially from you and from the community. But I really want to mention also Joseph, that was our president at the time, because he was really found himself in a difficult situation, and I have to say he listened to the request for help that we put from Italy immediately, and tried to support every initiative and every idea that we had from this side. But yeah, I have to say I'm proud of having been part of this community this year, and also to thank you and Next and everyone involved. I think we should be proud of what we've done. It's not enough, but I think we should be proud of what we've done.
I would like for the first question to go a step back. As you have alluded, structure of leadership also in normal times is essential. So could you name, or what do you think are essential necessary skills for good leadership?
Wow, that's a question where somebody can speak for hours, but I share what I've learned on myself. I think, first of all, leadership is not just leadership towards the others, but it's also leadership of yourself. And, you need to understand what are your values, and understand that your values have to be aligned with the values of your group. This is something, for instance, that in every job that I took was the first time where I start a job, I always try to put a lot of effort and energy and time speaking with people and understanding what are the values that we agree as a group we need to use as our guide, and then be clear about the vision that you want to achieve. So if you're clear about your vision and what you want to achieve, and you stick to your values to achieve that vision, then even if you have dilemmas on the way, even if you have uncertainty on the way, you will always make the right decision together as a group in that moment. And it's okay if afterwards it was the wrong decision, because you've done it together. You need to be prepared to change again, and you need to do it in that way. Another very important thing is, especially if you are leading big groups or big departments, but it's true also for smaller groups, it's really important to create this climate of psychological safety that Amy Edmondson is describing very well. So just to tell people what to do is not going to lead you anywhere. It's very important to explore with questions what others may think could be the resources to find a solution for the problem, and not to intimidate people to say something against you. Somebody calls this maybe even being the devil's advocate. So to give the task to someone actually to challenge the solution that you are proposing. So even to look at the negative sides. It's okay. At the end of the day, however, it's important that the communication is inclusive with everyone, and that what you decide in that moment is a decision that comes from the group. Even if somebody was disagreeing, even if it was not the beginning, even if it didn't start from that at the beginning, but then you go out with the decision as a group. And in a crisis, Stefan, also reassessing and meeting as often as you can. So there is never enough communication to do. But to do those things in a crisis, you need to prepare the structure of your team during a normal time. So clear vision, stick to the values, communicate, encourage people to disagree or to come with proposals to you, and try to give a voice also to those team members that may be a bit shy sometimes. So you have to find different ways of communicating with different people.
Thank you, Maurizio. Another question in this direction is, how did you handle the anxiety in your team, especially in this time of uncertainty?
That's another very important question, and I have a lot of memories from it. As I told you, at the beginning, what was keeping me awake at night in the first days of the crisis were mainly two things. I wanted to try to give an ICU bed to whoever would benefit from one, but at the same time, I didn't want my team to be in danger. And we were all scared, especially at the beginning. We didn't know how effective this was with the personal protective equipment and so on. So we tried to speak as much as possible to each other. I think in a position of leadership, as a leader, you need to be also open and transparent about your vulnerability. So I was also telling my team that I was also scared, and that I didn't know, to the extent of which would have been a danger, but I promised them that I would have put every single means in my hands to try to protect each other. And that's exactly what we did. And the example of having a safety officers in charge of supervising the doffing, that was a very, it seems like a very simple intervention, but it was not easy to achieve at the beginning when you don't have enough staff, just to put someone just in charge of that process. I really don't know if in practice it made a difference at the end, if that was the reason why we didn't get any infections. But the fact that we decided together to go for that, even to work harder and to have someone outside of the rotas to be in charge of helping everyone with the doffing, made everyone feeling safer and feeling that we were not just talking about protecting each other, but that we were putting some concrete actions in place about protecting each other. And that's usually, it will not cut down completely the anxiety, but it will decrease it a lot. And I remember one of the moments where I felt very, very reassured by my team was receiving a couple of emails sometimes at night of some of my team members saying, I just want to let you know that I feel very safe before I'm starting my shift. I don't have to worry about PPEs. I know that I will be protected, and don't worry about the rest. We know it's hard, but we will get there. And these things are very important also as feedback for you to receive.
I'm switching gear a little bit because there are two questions regarding C19 space program. So one question is, there is a continuation of C19 space for summer staff who arrives new without experience to the ICU. And do you think it is a good option, or should we ensure that experienced staff from the hospital organizations should be deployed again?
So, look, first of all, there is never enough training. Second, what we've learned from the pandemic was that to be prepared is better than not to be prepared. So I don't think you should necessarily decide on these two things. I think you can plan, you can work on contingency plans and escalation plans that take in consideration both, in the sense that if you can have skilled personnel or the next more skilled personnel, that's who you should put in these rotas. But the reality is that, let's face it, no one of us thought that you could increase 4-6 times the number of beds in the hospital with the need of respiratory support. That's something that is not scalable just with a few extra healthcare workers. So to give those skills to people, to make them in a position that could help more experienced people, I think it's something that we should consider doing. And I don't know how we can find a way to influence institutions, but it's certainly something that we are trying to do. We are trying to promote this kind of training for the future, also in normal times. I am sure we all do the basic life support, the advanced life support. Everyone does some of these courses. Maybe we should start to think also about having some kind of courses for the stabilization of the critical ill patients. Again, it needs to be done under the supervision of an intensivist. And if you remember, the way we decided to deliver C19 space was that we wanted to have local trainers, because as a local trainer, you can actually train and teach people also about the specific logistics of your ICU and your hospital, because an ICU is not just 4 closed walls, it's integrated in a hospital. So it's very important also to know how your ICU team will work together with your hospital.
Yeah, I also would answer the question like that we are working in a qualification mix. So as you said, because you need people now also, for example, in Germany, where the numbers are going down, but people now have also to rest. And so I think we will continue at the moment to work with a qualification mix of people who are less experienced in the ICU and people who are experienced in the ICU.
I think valid point, Stefan. I agree with you.
And I really also hope, because I can tell you that we at the Charité, we would also like to continue to use the C19 space program. And so I really hope that we can convince the European Commission that it is given back to the European Society of Intensive Care and that we can use it freely. And that's actually one of the next questions. And I know what you will answer, so allow me to shorten that up.
Then you can answer.
So the question is, if the C19 space program should be also be expanded across the globe to be accessed by everyone. And actually, this is the clear goal of Maurizio and also the society. And we hope that, that this will be the final decision. I don't know if you have any update on that.
No, not yet, but I think you answered for me. The only thing that I would like to reassure everyone is even without C19 space, the society, I think we were among the first one in the world, but we're not the only one. I think the response of scientific society has been very nice and very cohesive. We have put together resources free for everyone, for members, but also for non-members. That was the reason why, Stefan, we decided to have so many free webinars for everyone. And I think we have done nearly hundreds now in 15 months. Nearly every week there is something. So we want to provide free knowledge on that. And some of the modules related to respiratory failure in our academy have been open exactly to allow everyone to get some skills, also to non-members. We did exactly for that. Clearly, C19 space is such a nice and structured program that to be able to use it again and to expand the scope, it's one of our aims. But don't worry, even without being able to open that yet, there is still a lot of free education that I am committed, and I know that all of you are committed to deliver for the rest of the world. We are also working with low and middle income countries now to try to create some training specifically for them, because clearly not everything in C19 space, which is what about ICUs in Europe, is transferable in other parts of the world. But I do think that a scientific society like ours has absolutely the duty to take care of the whole global intensive care community, and training as being probably one of the most important things, really, to focus on people and to give some extra tools to everyone around the world.
A critical question, I think, which we have to think about is COVID-19 was not the healthcare crisis in history. Why were we correctly or good prepared? Could have we been prepared better? As you have alluded now we have the idea to continue training for people outside the ICU, but this is also a political discussion, of course, I know, but what is your opinion on that?
So look, I think we have to be honest with each other, and I can tell you I was not prepared for a pandemic, but I think I can speak for many of my colleagues in Europe and around the world. I don't think no one was prepared for a pandemic. From an healthcare perspective, from a country perspective, from a political perspective, the world was simply not ready. And it showed how frail our system can be, because they always work on about plus and 10-15% of capacity. How easy it is to overwhelm a system if you don't control the spread of the infection in the community. It's important, however, to pass a strong message, I would say, to the political world and also to citizens. ICUs are really the last line of defense. And to put all the efforts just in increasing ICU beds or hospital beds with the idea that we can just take care of more COVID patients, I think it's an illusion. This is not going to work. We need to work, first of all, in controlling the infection in the community. Now we have vaccines. But until we have not vaccinated the whole population, we also have to have surveillance in place. And I don't think the surveillance that we had in terms of test and trace and genetic surveillance, I don't think was good enough around the world. I think we can definitely do better. And there will be other pandemics, there will be other outbreaks in the future. We need to have a blueprint really to control this in the community. And I really think that, you know, the biggest difference that we've seen when the pandemic has been brought under control was actually made by citizens adhering to public health measures and now to getting vaccinated. That's an extraordinary help that, you know, prevents the need for more beds and so on. One last comment on this. Remember that we knew this even before COVID for sepsis and for critical illness. Just the fact that you can access an ICU bed, unfortunately, does not mean that everyone will survive. And even survivors from ICU, they may have a long sequelae. It's called long COVID now from COVID, but you know, a post-ICU syndrome, post-sepsis syndrome. It's something that can take months sometimes to go back to a good quality of life. We have done some studies recently from my institution. We've seen that, for instance, even returning to work, many people are able to do it if they're in their working age, but some are not able to go back to work after some months. You know, we really have to put an effort in stopping the infection as much as we can, and to understand that intensive care is not just the ICU bed, but also how we're going to help all these patients with the recovery in the community and so on and so on.
Yeah, that will be the big questions in the next time, I believe. You know, how to rehabilitate patients and how to help also or prevent long-term problems in the future again. Going back to some leadership topics again from the questions. How do you think actually, two questions are quite similar. So how can local leaders be supported when they have the feeling that they do not have much support above themselves? Or in other words, if someone feels there's absence of leadership or loses faith in an institution, what are things, how you can handle that?
Two important questions, very different in a way, so I will try to elaborate further the first one. I think peer support is very important in this sense. So, you know, if you are a leader of a team locally, you can still get support from your team, of course, which is important, but also you will have other people in your position, maybe either in different departments or other ICUs in your area. For instance, locally, we kept a group of ICUs meeting almost every week now for 15 months, and we don't discuss just about the crisis. We discuss about the common challenges, how do you deal with some issues, and so on. So I think this is a message, because sometimes in a leadership position, it could be very easy to feel alone, and it's very important to try to go and seek for this support, and you often find that your problems are problems that are very common with others. When you think that you don't receive the support from your institution, that's a very difficult question. I was lucky, I have to say, to work in my two last jobs in London and here, to work in institutions where actually intensive care was considered as part of the line of the crisis committees and so on, and we received a lot of support and a lot of understanding of our requests and so on. If you don't have that, I think it's a very difficult situation to handle. I do find, however, that if you are in a moment where your voice is not heard, maybe you need to try to find a different way of communicating the same message. If you really believe that the message has to be out there and you need to find resources or support, if it doesn't work with one strategy, you have to try different strategies. You know, with the usual ways of trying to get some political support sometimes, so even trying to get some allies in your institution and so on. These are common ways and common human factors. But, you know, not everything is roses. You can have difficult situations, and in that moment, I do think that one of the most important things to do is to try to manage the conflict that you may have from the institution and your team. So to be very transparent with your team that you will carry on fighting for them and for what you decide together, but at the same time that maybe you didn't get the support that you wanted. And again, transparency in communicating this, even to show a little bit your vulnerability, I don't think is decreasing, if you can call it power, I don't think it decreases the respect. I think actually you gain respect and you gain trust from your team, and they may help even more. How do you do it, Stefan? Because you also are in a leadership position.
Well, so the institutional goals and ours were, of course, aligned. I think this is an important thing, and we had, of course, a lot of discussions. And I think one of the problems I wanted to discuss with you was that you focus very much on transparency and communication. But I found it quite difficult, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, to align communication. We got so much information. Things were changing quite quickly, and to find a way of communication and while we were not allowed to meet was challenging in the beginning. Of course, emails and so on. Now we have established everything. We are meeting, all together through Teams, and this is aligned, and people can questions. But in the beginning, it was quite challenging, also for me, because there was an information overflow, and you tried to get the information together, and also it was changing so quickly. So if you were telling one thing, the next day some things were already different. So and I think one important thing also as a leader is to prevent this overflow on information on the people you're responsible for. So to find a way to transparent communicate, but also in a way that they are not, have to read through 50 emails, and also to get the important information to them. And I'm curious how you did that in the beginning, because I believe that would have been even more challenging with you
So very clear, and it's a very important question, Stefan. So first of all, I would say don't get put down by the situation, because the uncertainty and the dynamics of the situation means that what you're saying today in 48 or 72 hours may be different. And I think accepting this, it's very important at the beginning, and communicating this, it's very important, also with your team at the very beginning. Framing the problem and the situation is key. So you need to spend a little bit of time before the meeting to be able to frame the situation. So to say, what is the problem? What is the biggest problem that you have? So if you frame the problem properly and you explain that you are very uncertain about some data that is coming through, about some solutions and so on, then it's a really good start. And then a good way to handle that conversations, I always found, is be very clear about what you can take for sure. There may be 2-3 pieces of information that you have that are important to pass in that moment. It could be that at the beginning, the important information to pass is the procurement has managed to get enough PPEs for the next 2 weeks, so don't worry about it. That's one statement. It may be already cutting down the anxiety if in your framework, what you thought was important was actually the anxiety and the safety of your team, because at the beginning you didn't have all of this. And at the same time, to say that you don't know what's going to happen because the situation is dynamic, but every new information that you trust, you will pass that information in the next update. That's also okay. At the beginning, what I used to do was meeting at least once a week, face-to-face with video calls and so on. And then I was trying to have a kind of an email that was sent out maybe twice a week. And writing that email was also a way for me to reflect on what has happened and to frame and to put order in my thoughts. So I was doing it for the others, but probably I was doing it also for me. And again, there's nothing wrong in saying what I'm telling you today It's what we are going to do, and we will do this. So the actions have to then to be clear, and you need to be decisive about what you will do after you decided together that these are the actions that you're going to take. But you're going to be very clear about saying the situation may evolve. If anything changes and we need to review our strategy, I will let you know and we discuss together again. So framing, first of all, then be clear about what you are sure about, be clear about what you don't know anything about, and communicate a little bit this uncertainty very frequently. There is not enough communication. People, they get upset if there is silence. They will not be upset if today you say, if today you pass one information and then 3 days later is different. But of course, you need to be clear also about your decision making. If you make one decision today and then you're not consistent with the actions until the next meeting, people usually don't like that. Nobody likes that.
Well, one of the challenges in my department were that we actually had to open a COVID ICU again, and that was at Christmas time, so we had to reschedule all working schedules around Christmas time. That was, of course,
that has been one of the most stressful things for everyone. You know, short term before shift changes and so on, and you need to accept that you can minimize sometimes problems, but you cannot avoid them. And again, being clear about that. It's also important. I remember my last meetings in the last few months, I was saying to everyone, you know, if you're not tired, it's not normal. So I am tired too. And we need to realize this also to be aware of it, and then to find ways to you know, to give each other a little bit of time to rest as soon as it is possible.
I see another more general question and also political question for our field. How to give more voice to ICM leaders in low middle income countries?
Very good question. I can tell you what we are doing. I don't know if it is right or wrong, but first of all, one of the things that I have learned in even more in this crisis is that when you want to help someone, it's not as important the help that you want to give. What is important is the help that they need. And you know, for instance, I remember looking at oxygen. We heard about oxygen supply that was very challenging in some parts of the world. But when I spoke with those colleagues, they told me, look, if you send oxygen, actually, it's of no use now, because the problem is we have oxygen, but we don't have truck drivers because they're all sick. Or if you're sending oxygen concentrators with the wrong voltage, they're not going to work. And we don't think about these things because we, you know, I think the majority of us are nice people. You want to help and you are prepared to give something to someone. But the crucial thing, if you really want to help, is to ask them, I want to help. What can I do for you? What is really your, you know, your issue? And I'm going to try to see if I can help you. So this is what we have tried to do now with some low and middle income countries. And again, one of the comments was not just please send devices and ventilators, but can you help us to deliver some training and some, you know, to provide extra training so that we can grow together intensive care in this country. One other thing that I've learned, Stefan, is that I don't think it works if we believe that the high-income countries can go and teach low and middle-income countries. I think what happens is that we are learning from each other, and I have to say that it was the first time in my life where I've been put in a situation of limited resources. It was the first time that I didn't have all the ventilators and all the staff members that I wanted with the right skills. So I was actually learning from those colleagues that normally are in this situation to understand how they will deal normally with that situation. So I think it needs to be a process where we are progressing the global intensive care community. But if you really want to help with our expertise, because maybe we have more resources to deliver some teaching and some local learning, very important to ask, what do you need? Do you need help? How can I help you? I think this is really the only way that I think we can really help people. Otherwise, we may be perceived that we are helping them and maybe we're not.
So we are having this leadership conversation and also your talk today, do you believe that it would make sense, because the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine really has a strong effort also in bringing education forward? Do you believe in the future we will have more educational resources also for leadership in intensive care?
Look, I was very happy when we decided to do this run of webinars today, these weeks, and we started today. I think in your question we already have the answer. I think it's skills that we are learning that are very important to get. It's very important to have these conversations. You know, physiology and mechanical devices have been our passion. That's why we went into intensive care. But intensive care is first of all a team of people, and we are all, in whatever position we are, we have to work in a team, and to be able to learn leadership skills, I think it's something that can be useful for anyone, whatever is your position in the team. So I think, Stefan, back to your question, we're already thinking of delivering something, and we have already some courses, but I think you're right, we have to do more of this. In leadership, in quality improvement, teaching people how to use data to provide the care at the bedside that is driven by data. Not research, I'm talking looking at data that can really drive your actions to improve patients' outcomes and families' experiences. So I think we should do it. I think we've learned that is important, and we should exercise this more and more in the next years.
Okay, interesting. We haven't talked about that so much yet. Another question specific to the pandemic, but also leadership in general. I mean, we have discussed it already, and it was part of the questions, you know, the unpreparedness. I mean, as a leader, that there was so much new, and you also said, you know, there was uncertainty. So any tips from your side, like on a more personal level, perhaps, how you could handle this unpreparedness, this uncertainty? So as a leader like you?
So, first of all, I don't think you can be prepared for, for every single situation that will arise. There could be something completely new that will come and you don't know. But what you can prepare is the way you are going to act and react to a situation like that. So I think you may not be prepared for the specific situation, but I think you should be prepared as a leader to handle uncertainty. And if you remember in my first slides, I was saying that when we have uncertainty, the classic, the more common reaction is to downplay that uncertainty, is to downplay the threat. You may have seen it in Germany, maybe. I've seen it a lot in Italy. I've seen it a lot in the news in many parts of the world. At the beginning, a very common phrase was that this is just a flu. By the way, the flu can be dangerous, so I didn't like that metaphor anyway, but there were a lot of people saying this is just a flu, it's nothing serious. Now, you know that when you are in an outbreak, every day that you lose by putting a plan of action in place, it's hundreds of lives that can be saved that you're not saving in intensive care, but also in the community by putting restrictive measures and so on and so on. I believe what we've learned, and this applies not just to intensive care, that the countries that had the best response to the pandemic so far are those countries in which their leaders have followed the advice of science. They looked at the data, they trusted the data, even if the data was not perfect, and they have acted with urgency, focusing on problem solving and accepting that if new data comes out and the data is confuting what you knew before, you will change your strategy. But you need to use the data that you have in front of your eyes. If you're just denying the data because you don't like it, you're just losing time, and that's not a good way to navigate in uncertainty. So I think any crisis with uncertainty, it's important. Collect the data that you have, whatever you have. For us, it was very simple data at the beginning. Number of cases in the hospital, a number of ICU cases day by day. But that was enough to see that that was real. In just a few days, it was a trend we could not deny. We had to pass this message to the outside world. We had to take action locally very fast. And I think this is going to be true for anyone. And I really admire some leaders worldwide that followed science, they followed data, they acted with urgency, and at the same time, they were able to change sometimes strategy a few weeks later if the situation was changing. I think that's maybe one key message. It's not that your actions have to be consistent for the next 15 months and you never do something different, in the next 15 months. Your actions have to be consistent with the analysis of the situation that you have in that moment. They have to be consistent with the data, with the frame of the problem that you have in that moment, and with what we are deciding together with your team, sticking to your values. Then, as I said, I don't think it's an issue that if new information comes out, you will do something different next time.
Thank you. I think the next question is a very good one in adjunction to this one. So you as a healthcare leader, you were present a lot, so you dealt with political, business, and perhaps, I don't know, also military world. And the question is, how did you navigate through such meetings with different groups where different languages are spoken? Because you also, did you have experience on that, and how did you manage that?
No, I didn't have experience of this before, because I don't think no one hopes to start as president-elect of a society or to lead a department during a pandemic, but we've all been in the same boat. One thing to remember is that, one thing that I've learned is that the context changes a lot, and you need to be aware of the political context. But the reality is that the way you act in that context, of course, you need to adapt to the situation. The way I'm speaking to you, Stefan, will not be the same way that I'm speaking to a politician. But the values that I have in my head to answer to you and to that politician have to be exactly the same one. If you're not, if you don't have integrity about the values that are leading your action and your advice, whether you're in a scientific committee, whether you are asked to give advice or to try to get decisions locally, nationally, internationally, if you create conflicts within yourself, inside yourself about values, I think it becomes impossible to navigate the situation. If on the other hand, you're consistent about what are your common goals, your clear goals about your values in this, then you can adapt to the circumstances, and and it's the way, I think, to try to do it. Sorry.
Thank you, Maurizio. I would like to finish our talk with last time with a more personal question. You were talking in your talk that leadership is also taking care of yourself. So my personal question to you is, when do you and how do you recharge yourself? Is it even possible in your position?
No, I don't think it's impossible. I think you need to have priorities. So for me, I have a family, I have a young family. And so, I will spend all my time outside of the hospital with them. Something has to go, if you don't have, the day has 24 hours. If you need to sleep, to work, and to spend some quality time with the people that you love, you need to choose. So unfortunately, I didn't see much my friends this year, but I spent all my time with my family. And then I think you need to find what is the thing that for you helps to recharge your batteries. So for me, for instance, is again, spending time with my family and doing some exercise. If you're asking me, even last year when we had the first wave, I was waking up at 5 o'clock and going for a run before going to work. And, and that was helping me to keep my balance. So to keep your balance, I think it's something that is important. And so when you were asking me before, what is leadership? I think it's first of all leadership of yourself. So you need to know yourself, and we're all different. But for me, spending time with my family and squeezing a little bit of exercise is what charges my battery and what makes me more balanced at work. And I think if I don't give myself the time to do that, then I run the risk to be a worse leader and maybe to waste more time at work.
Maurizio.
What do you do, Stefan?
So I can tell you, I do not like to run. So my thing is going to the gym at the evening, actually. So I do not like it very much in the morning. But after my workday, I really love to go to the gym and get my head off and all of it, and find some energy charging by that, I have to say. And this was also quite difficult during the pandemic because the gyms were closed. So I found alternatives, but I'm happy that that has changed now again. With that, Maurizio, I really would like to thank you to answer all these questions, to give a fantastic talk again, to be not only transparent, but very open and also personal to us. Again, I would like you for the leadership and everything you did for the society. And I would like to thank the audience for all the questions and hope we will see you again in the next session of this webinars. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. Bye-bye, everyone. Stay safe.